Second Samuel. A quick look at this book. Yeah. The second book of Samuel is actually the second half of a single book that was divided into two parts. One and two Samuel, first and second Samuel. Because together they were too long to fit on one scroll, most of second Samuel is a history of the rule of King David. After the death of King Saul, the people of the Judah tribe chose David to be their king. And for the next 7 years, David was at war with Saul's son, King Ishbosheth of Israel. Then David became king of the entire nation. David captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites, made it his new capital, and brought the sacred chest there. He wanted to build a temple to honor the Lord and as a place to keep the sacred chest, but the Lord refused to let him do so. Instead, the Lord promised that David would be a powerful ruler and that one of his descendants would always be king. David conquered the enemies of Israel and became the ruler of a small empire. But he also had an affair with Bathsheba, the wife of an army officer who was always at war. As a result, the Lord allowed David to have serious troubles later on, and many of those troubles came from within his own family. For example, one of David's sons, Amnon, raped David's daughter Tamar. Amnon was then killed by David's son Absalom, who later led a rebellion against David. David wasn't perfect, but he was loyal to the Lord and worshipped only him. And for as long as Judah continued as a nation, the Lord kept the promise he made to David. Now I promise that you and your descendants will be kings. I'll choose one of your sons to be king when you reach the end of your life and are buried in the tomb of your ancestors. I'll make him a strong ruler, and no one will be able to take his kingdom away from him. I will be his father, and he will be my son. David mourns for Saul. Chapter 1. David finds out about Saul's death. Saul was dead. Meanwhile, David had defeated the Amalekites and returned to Ziklag. 3 days later, a soldier came from Saul's army. His clothes were torn and earth was on his head. He went to David and knelt down in front of him. David asked, "Where did you come from?" The man answered, "From Israel's army. I barely escaped with my life." "Who won the battle?" David asked. The man said, "Our army turned and ran, but many were wounded and died. Even King Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." David asked, "How do you know Saul and Jonathan are dead?" The young man replied, "I was on Mount Gilboa and saw King Saul leaning on his spear. The enemy's war chariots and cavalry were closing in on him. When he turned around and saw me, he called me over. I went and asked what he wanted. Saul asked me, 'Who are you?' 'An Amalekite,' I answered. Then he said, 'Kill me, I'm dying and I'm in terrible pain.' So I killed him. I knew he was too badly wounded to live much longer. Then I took his crown and his armband, and I brought them to you, your majesty. Here they are." Straight away David and his soldiers tore their clothes in sorrow. They cried all day long and would not eat anything. Everyone was sad because Saul, his son Jonathan, and many of the Lord's people had been killed in the battle. David asked the young man, "Where is your home?" The man replied, "My father is an Amalekite, but we live in Israel." David said to him, "Why weren't you afraid to kill the Lord's chosen king? And you even told what you did. It's your own fault that you are going to die." Then David told one of his soldiers, "Come here and kill this man." David sings in memory of Saul. David sang a song in memory of Saul and Jonathan, and he ordered his men to teach the song to everyone in Judah. He called it the Song of the Bow, and it can be found in the book of Joshua. This is the song. "Israel, your famous hero lies dead on the hills, and your mighty warriors have fallen. Don't tell it in Gath, or spread the news in the streets of Ashkelon. The godless Philistine women will be happy and jump for joy. Don't let dew or rain fall on the hills of Gilboa. Don't let its fields grow offerings for God. There the warriors' shields were smeared with mud, and Saul's own shield was left unpolished. The arrows of Jonathan stuck, and warriors died. The sword of Saul cut the enemy part. It was easy to love Saul and Jonathan, together in life, together in death. They were faster than eagles and stronger than lions. Women of Israel cry for Saul. He brought you fine red cloth and jewelry made of gold. Our warriors have fallen in the heat of battle, and Jonathan lies dead on the hills of Gilboa. Jonathan, I miss you most. I loved you like a brother. You were truly loyal to me, more faithful than a wife to her husband. Our warriors have fallen, and their weapons are destroyed. David, king of Judah, chapter 2. Later, David asked the Lord, should I go back to one of the towns of Judah? The Lord answered yes. David asked, which town should I go to? Go to Hebron. The Lord replied. David went to Hebron with his two wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. Ahinoam was from Jezreel, and Abigail was the widow of Nabal from Carmel. David also took his men and their families to live in the villages near Hebron. The people of Judah met with David at Hebron and poured olive oil on his head to show that he was their new king. Then they told David, the people from Jabesh in Gilead buried Saul. David sent messengers to tell them, the Lord bless you. You were kind enough to bury Saul your ruler, and I pray that the Lord will be kind and faithful to you. I will be your friend because of what you have done. Saul is dead, but the tribe of Judah has made me their king. So be strong and have courage. Ishbosheth becomes king of Israel. Abner, the son of Ner, had been the general of Saul's army. He took Saul's son Ishbosheth across the river Jordan to Mahanaim and made him king of Israel, including the areas of Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, and Benjamin. Ishbosheth was 40 years old at the time, and he ruled for 2 years. But the tribe of Judah made David their king, and he ruled from Hebron from 7.5 years. The war between David and Ishbosheth. One day Abner and the soldiers of Ishbosheth left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Meanwhile, Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was leading David's soldiers, and the two groups met at the pool in Gibeon. Abner and his men sat down on one side of the pool, while Joab and his men sat on the other side. Abner yelled to Joab, let's get some of our best soldiers to stand up and fight each other. Joab agreed, and 12 of Ishbosheth's men from the tribe of Benjamin got up to fight 12 of David's men. They grabbed each other by the hair and stabbed each other in the side with their daggers. They all died there. That's why the place in Gibeon is called the Field of Daggers. Then everyone started fighting. Both sides fought very hard, but David's soldiers defeated Abner and the soldiers of Israel. Zeruiah's three sons were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel could run as fast as a deer in an open field, and he ran straight after Abner without looking to the right or to the left. When Abner turned and saw him, he said, is that you, Asahel? Asahel answered, yes, it is. Abner said, there are soldiers all around. Stop chasing me and fight one of them. Kill him and take his clothes and weapons for yourself. But Asahel refused to stop. Abner said, if you don't turn back, I'll have to kill you. Then I could never face your brother Joab again. But Asahel would not turn back, so Abner struck him in the stomach with the back end of his spear. Spear went all the way through and came out of his back. Asahel fell down and died. Everyone who saw Asahel lying dead just stopped and stood still. But Joab and Abishai went after Abner. Finally, about sunset, they came to the hill of Ammah, not far from Gath, on the road to Gibeon Desert. Abner brought the men of Benjamin together in one group on top of a hill, and they got ready to fight. Abner shouted to Joab, aren't we ever going to stop killing each other? Don't you know that the longer we keep on doing this, the worse it's going to be when it's all over? When are you going to order your men to stop chasing their own relatives?" Joab shouted back, "Swear by the living God, if you hadn't spoken, my men would have chased their relatives all night." Joab took his trumpet and blew the signal for his soldiers to stop chasing the soldiers of Israel. Straight away, the fighting stopped. Abner and his troops marched through the Jordan Valley all the night. Then they crossed the river and marched all morning until they arrived back at Mahanaim. As soon as Joab stopped chasing Abner, he got David's troops together and counted them. There were 19 missing besides Asahel, but David's soldiers had killed 360 of Abner's men from the tribe of Benjamin. Joab and his troops carried Asahel's body to Bethlehem and buried him in the family burial place. Then they marched all night and reached Hebron before sunrise. Chapter 3. This battle was the beginning of a long war between the followers of Saul and the followers of David. Saul's power grew weaker, but David's grew stronger. David's sons born in Hebron. Several of David's sons were born while he was living in Hebron. His eldest son was Amnon, whose mother was Ahinoam from Jezreel. David's second son was Chileab, whose mother was Abigail, who had been married to Nabal from Carmel. Absalom was the third. His mother was Maacah, the daughter of King Talmai of Geshur. The fourth was Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, whose mother was Abital. The sixth was Ithream, whose mother was Eglah, another one of David's wives. Abner decides to help David. As the war went on between the families of David and Saul, Abner was gaining more power than ever in Saul's family. He had even slept with a wife of Saul by the name of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. But Saul's son Ishbosheth told Abner, "You shouldn't have slept with one of my father's wives." Abner was very angry at what Ishbosheth had said, and he told Ishbosheth, "Am I some kind of worthless dog from Judah? I've always been loyal to your father's family and to his relatives and friends. I haven't turned you over to David, and yet you talk to me as if I've committed a crime with this woman. I ask God to punish me if I don't help David get what the Lord promised him." God said that he wouldn't let anyone in Saul's family ever be king again and that David would be king instead. He also said that David would rule both Israel and Judah, all the way from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. Ishbosheth was so afraid of Abner that he could not even answer. Abner sent some of his men to David with this message: "You should be the ruler of the whole nation. If you make an agreement with me, I will persuade everyone in Israel to make you their king." David sent this message back: "Good, I'll make an agreement with you, but before I will even talk with you about it, you must get Saul's daughter Michal back for me." David sent a few of his officials to Ishbosheth to give him this message: "Give me back my wife Michal. I killed 100 Philistines so I could marry her." Ishbosheth sent some of his men to take Michal away from her new husband, Paltiel, the son of Laish. Paltiel followed Michal and the men all the way to Bahurim, crying as he walked. But he went back home after Abner ordered him to leave. Abner talked with the leaders of the tribes of Israel and told them, "You've wanted to make David your king for a long time now, so do it. After all, God said he would use his servant David to rescue his people Israel from their enemies, especially from the Philistines." Finally, Abner talked with the tribe of Benjamin. Then he left for Hebron to tell David everything that the tribe of Benjamin and the rest of the people of Israel wanted to do. Abner took 20 soldiers with him, and when they got to Hebron, David gave a big feast for them. After the feast, Abner said, "Your Majesty, let me leave now and bring Israel here to make an agreement with you. You will be king of the whole nation just as you've been wanting." David told Abner he could leave, and he left without causing any trouble. Joab kills Abner. Soon after Abner had left Hebron, Joab and some of David's soldiers came back, bringing a lot of things they had taken from an enemy village. Just after they arrived, someone told Joab, Abner visited the king, and the king let him go. Abner even left without causing any trouble. Joab went to David and said, What have you done? Abner came to you and you let him go. Now he's long gone. You know Abner, he came to trick you. He wants to find out how strong your army is and to know everything you are doing. Joab left David, then he sent some messengers to catch up with Abner. They brought him back from the well at Shirah, but David did not know anything about it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab pretended he wanted to talk privately with him, so he took Abner into one of the small rooms that were part of the town gate and stabbed him in the stomach. Joab killed him because Abner had killed Joab's brother Asahel. Abner's funeral. David heard how Joab had killed Abner, and he said, Swear to the Lord that I am completely innocent of Abner's death. Joab and his family are the guilty ones. I pray that Joab's family will always be sick with some sores and other skin diseases. May they all be cowards, and may they die in war or starve to death. Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. David told Joab and everyone with him, Show your sorrow by tearing your clothes and wearing sackcloth. Walk in front of Abner's body and cry. David walked behind the stretcher on which Abner's body was being carried. Abner was buried in Hebron while David and everyone else stood at the tomb and cried loudly. Then the king sang a funeral song about Abner. Abner, why should you have died like an outlaw? No one tied your hands or chained your feet, yet you died as a victim of murderers. Everyone started crying again. Then they brought some food to David and told him he would feel better if he had something to eat. It was still daytime, and David said, I swear to God that I will not take a bite of bread or anything else until sunset. Everyone noticed what David did, and they liked it, just as they always liked what he did. Now the people of Judah and Israel were certain that David had nothing to do with killing Abner. David said to his officers, Don't you realize that today one of Israel's great leaders has died? I am the chosen king, but Joab and Abishai have more power than I do. So God will have to pay them back for the evil thing they did.